When a middle school nurse notices a new transfer student who refuses to remove her oversized hoodie during gym class, despite the sweltering gymnasium and strict dress code, something about her furtive behavior and occasional winces of pain begins to trouble her. What started as a routine health concern would soon uncover a shocking situation that had been hidden beneath layers of fabric and silence for months. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when caring professionals trust their instincts, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. She couldn't have known that her insistence on a basic health check would reveal something so disturbing she would literally run screaming for help, until the moment the hoodie zipper came down and changed multiple lives forever. Sarah Patel had been the school nurse at Westridge Middle School for just over 4 years. At 35, her calm efficiency and genuine compassion had earned her the respect of both students and staff in the diverse suburban school. With her glossy dark hair typically secured in a practical bun and warm brown eyes that projected both professional competence and genuine kindness, Nurse Patel, as she was known to the nearly 700 students under her care, had created a health office where even the most anxious teenagers felt comfortable seeking help. Beyond simply addressing immediate health concerns, Sarah prided herself on identifying potential issues before they escalated, believing that prevention was always preferable to crisis intervention. Her meticulously organized health office was located near the gymnasium, making it easily accessible during sports activities and physical education classes when injuries were most common. The walls were painted a soothing sage green and decorated with age-appropriate health education posters she rotated regularly to maintain student interest. 2 examination areas with privacy screens stood ready for student assessments, and a small rest area with 3 clean cots provided space for students needing to lie down during the school day. Unlike the sterile, clinical feel of many school health offices, Sarah had created an environment that balanced professional medical standards with welcoming warmth. Sarah lived in a modern townhouse about 15 minutes from the school with her husband Dev, a pediatric physical therapist whose insights often complemented her own work with adolescents. The couple had moved to the area 6 years earlier when Dev received a position at the Regional Children's Hospital, and Sarah had quickly found her professional home at Westridge. They had a 10-year-old son, Ajay, whose experiences in the local school system gave Sarah additional perspective on the challenges students faced beyond health concerns. Principal Richard Bennett valued Sarah's contributions beyond basic health services. "You've created a health program that's truly preventive rather than merely reactive," he had noted during her most recent evaluation. "Students trust you enough to come forward with issues before they become crises, and that's an invaluable resource for our school community." Sarah had accepted the compliment graciously, though privately she considered building student trust fundamental to effective school nursing rather than a special achievement. Physical education teacher Darlene Jackson had become one of Sarah's closest colleagues at Westridge. They frequently consulted on supporting students with health limitations that affected their participation in gym class, with Darlene providing insights about student performance and Sarah offering medically appropriate modifications. Their collaborative approach had created a more inclusive physical education program that accommodated diverse health needs while still promoting fitness and well-being. There had been discussions at recent administrative meetings about the increasing complexity of student health needs within the district. Budget constraints had stretched support services thin, with Sarah herself responsible for the entire student population despite national recommendations for much lower nurse-to-student ratios. These limitations sometimes forced difficult decisions about which student needs could receive immediate attention and which required outside referrals to community providers already facing long waiting lists. One Tuesday afternoon in late September, Sarah had encountered an unfamiliar woman speaking with Principal Bennett in the main hallway. The woman, who she later learned was Dr. Mariana Reyes, the newly appointed director of the county's Adolescent Health Initiative, had greeted her with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the health challenges facing Westridge students. There was something refreshingly practical in her approach that resonated with Sarah's own philosophy of addressing root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. "We're trying to create more seamless connections between school-based health services and community providers," Dr. Reyes had explained. "Too many vulnerable students fall through the cracks when systems don't communicate effectively." This perspective aligned perfectly with concerns Sarah had raised repeatedly in staff meetings, and she'd left the brief encounter feeling cautiously optimistic about potential partnerships that might benefit her overstretched health services program. Early autumn had settled over the suburb of Westridge, bringing crisp mornings that gave way to unseasonably warm afternoons that left the school's aging HVAC system struggling to maintain comfortable temperatures. The middle school, a sprawling two-story brick building constructed in the 1980s, served approximately 700 students from diverse backgrounds. Inside, classrooms and hallways hummed with the energy of adolescents navigating not just academic challenges, but the complex social and emotional landscape of early teenage years. It was during this season of transition that Sarah first became concerned about Jasmine Rivera, a 14-year-old 8th grader who had transferred to Westridge just after the school year began. The girl was of average height with a slender build that her clothing seemed deliberately chosen to obscure, her face partially hidden behind long dark hair that she rarely pushed back. Her file indicated she lived with her father and older brother, having moved to the district following her parents' divorce. No significant health concerns had been noted during registration, though Sarah observed that her immunization records showed several gaps that would need addressing. But nothing could prepare Sarah for the mystery that would unfold around Jasmine's refusal to remove her hoodie. The first time Sarah really took notice was during a routine vision screening she was conducting in Darlene Jackson's physical education class. While other students wore the required gym uniforms, t-shirts and athletic shorts appropriate for the physical activity and warm gymnasium, Jasmine participated in an oversized black hoodie zipped to her chin, the sleeves extending past her fingertips. Despite the obvious discomfort this caused during exercises, with sweat visibly dampening her face, the girl refused to remove the garment. After the screenings were complete, Sarah approached Darlene privately. "I noticed Jasmine Rivera isn't wearing the gym uniform. Is there a reason she's been exempted from the dress code?" Darlene's expression reflected frustration mixed with concern. "She's not exempted. I've been trying to address it for 2 weeks now. She always has some excuse, forgot her uniform, has a doctor's note she never actually produces, or simply refuses to change. I've given her detention twice, but she accepts the punishment without changing her behavior. That seems like a pretty determined effort to keep covered up," Sarah observed, her professional instincts beginning to stir. "Has she given any indication why?" "None. She participates minimally in class activities, keeps to herself, and leaves immediately when the bell rings. I've tried speaking with her privately, but she shuts down completely." Darlene hesitated before adding, "I did notice she seems to be in pain sometimes, wincing when certain movements stretch her torso or when other students accidentally bump into her. I wondered if she might have an injury she's not reporting." This information heightened Sarah's concern considerably. In her experience, adolescents who went to unusual lengths to conceal their bodies often had significant reasons, from self-harm and eating disorders to evidence of abuse or medical conditions they were attempting to hide out of embarrassment or fear. "I think I'll try to check in with her," Sarah decided. At minimum, wearing a heavy hoodie during intense physical activity could lead to overheating. There might be a simple explanation, but it's worth looking into. Over the next week, Sarah created natural opportunities to observe Jasmine throughout the school day. She noticed that the hoodie remained a constant feature regardless of temperature or activity. Unlike typical fashion choices, which students often varied for social reasons, Jasmine wore the same black hoodie every day, occasionally supplemented with a larger jacket on cooler mornings. More concerning was the girl's social isolation. She ate lunch alone, spoke only when directly addressed by teachers, and physically flinched when other students came too close. During a routine medication drop-off for another student, Sarah casually observed Jasmine in her language arts class. When the teacher asked students to work in pairs, the girl's anxiety became visibly acute. Her breathing quickened. Her shoulders hunched protectively, and she cast her eyes downward in a manner that suggested not merely social awkwardness but genuine fear. "I'm concerned about Jasmine Rivera," Sarah told Principal Bennett during their weekly meeting. "She's showing several red flags that suggest something beyond typical adjustment issues for a transfer student." She detailed her observations: the refusal to change for gym despite consequences, apparent physical pain, extreme social withdrawal, and visible anxiety during peer interactions. These patterns together could indicate a range of concerns from bullying at her previous school to potential abuse or serious medical issues she's concealing. "Have you attempted to engage with her directly?" the principal asked. "I've tried casual interactions, but she's exceptionally guarded," Sarah explained. "I'm planning to request she come in for a basic health assessment, framing it as routine for new students. That might provide an opportunity to build some rapport and potentially identify any medical issues." Principal Bennett nodded his approval. "Proceed carefully. Document everything. If you discover anything requiring further intervention, we'll develop an appropriate response plan." The following day, Sarah sent a standard health assessment request form to Jasmine's classes. These routine checks for new students rarely raised concerns among the student body, providing a non-stigmatizing way to evaluate potential health issues. When Jasmine didn't appear at the scheduled time, Sarah was not entirely surprised given the girl's pattern of avoidance, but it confirmed the need for more direct intervention. With the physical education teacher's cooperation, Sarah arranged to be present at the beginning of Jasmine's gym period later that week. As students filtered into the locker room to change, she approached Jasmine gently.
Jasmina, im nur sa patel.
"I noticed you missed your new student health check yesterday. I thought we might be able to take care of it during this period, since you've been having some difficulties participating in PE." The girl's reaction was immediate, her body tensed visibly, eyes darting toward the nearest exit. "I'm fine," she said quietly but firmly. "I don't need a health check. It's standard procedure for all new students," Sarah explained calmly. "Just basic height, weight, vision, and a quick check of your health history. It won't take long, and it might help us understand if there are reasons you're having trouble with the gym uniform requirement." After a tense moment, Jasmine reluctantly followed Sarah to the health office, maintaining a careful distance as they walked. In the privacy of the examination area, Sarah began with simple, non-threatening measurements and questions, carefully noting Jasmine's increased anxiety as the assessment approached anything involving removal of clothing. "Your temperature is slightly elevated," Sarah observed, reviewing the thermometer reading. "Are you feeling unwell today?" Jasmine shook her head, eyes fixed on the floor. "You seem uncomfortable in the gym," Sarah continued conversationally. "Is there a specific reason you prefer to wear your hoodie during physical activities, even when it's quite warm?" "I just like it," Jasmine mumbled unconvincingly. "Jasmine," Sarah said gently, "part of my job is to make sure all students are healthy and safe at school. Sometimes when students are very determined to keep certain parts of their bodies covered, it's because there's something they're trying to hide. Maybe an injury, a medical condition they're embarrassed about, or sometimes marks that someone else has caused." The girl's head snapped up at this last suggestion, fear flashing across her face before she quickly composed her expression, a reaction that heightened Sarah's concern significantly. "I'd like to check your upper body briefly," Sarah continued, her voice calm despite her growing internal alarm. "You can keep your undergarments on, but I need you to unzip your hoodie so I can make sure everything is okay. Would that be all right?" "No," Jasmine replied immediately, wrapping her arms protectively around herself. "There's nothing to see. I want to go back to class." Sarah faced a difficult decision. The girl's reaction strongly suggested something concerning was being concealed, but forcing an examination could further traumatize a potentially already traumatized student. At the same time, if Jasmine was injured or being abused, further delay could allow the situation to worsen. "I understand this feels uncomfortable," Sarah acknowledged. "What if Ms. Jackson joins us? Would you feel more comfortable with her here too?" This suggestion only increased Jasmine's distress. "Please," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I just want to go." Making a professional judgment based on years of experience with adolescents in crisis, Sarah decided on a compassionate but firm approach. "Jasmine, I'm very concerned about your well-being right now. Your reaction suggests there's something happening that you're afraid to share. As a mandated reporter, I need to make sure you're not injured or in danger. I can call your father to be present, or we can have Principal Bennett or another female staff member join us, but I do need to check that you're physically okay." At the mention of her father, Jasmine's expression changed from anxiety to something closer to panic. "Don't call my dad," she said quickly. "Please don't." This response, fear at the prospect of parental involvement, was a significant red flag that Sarah couldn't ignore. "Okay," she said calmly. "I won't call him right now, but I do need to understand what's happening so I can help you." After a tense silence, Jasmine spoke so softly Sarah had to lean closer to hear. "If I show you, you can't tell anyone. You have to promise." "I can't make that promise," Sarah replied honestly. "If you're in danger or being hurt, I have a legal and ethical obligation to report that to people who can help. But I can promise that everything possible will be done to keep you safe." Tears now streaming down her face, Jasmine seemed to recognize she had reached an unavoidable moment of disclosure. With trembling hands, she slowly unzipped the hoodie she had worn like armor for weeks. What Sarah saw caused her to inhale sharply, momentarily frozen in shock before her medical training took over. Jasmine's torso was covered in burns and bruises in various stages of healing, some clearly recent, others faded to yellowish marks. Most disturbing were the clearly deliberate patterns. Circular burns consistent with cigarettes, linear marks suggesting a belt or cord, and bruising concentrated in areas that clothing would typically cover. Maintaining her professional composure for Jasmine's sake took extraordinary effort. "Thank you for trusting me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her internal distress. "Can you tell me who did this to you?" Jasmine pulled the edges of the hoodie back together protectively. "My brother," she whispered. "He says it's my fault Mom left, that I ruin everything. Dad works nights, so Jason's in charge. He says if I tell anyone, he'll make it worse." The revelation of systematic abuse by a sibling rather than a parent added complexity to an already disturbing situation. Sibling abuse is often overlooked or minimized, yet can be just as damaging as parental maltreatment. In this case, the older brother appeared to be blaming Jasmine for the family dissolution and exacting ongoing punishment while their father was absent. "Jasmine, what you've shown me is very serious," Sarah said carefully. "These injuries need proper medical attention, and more importantly, you need to be protected from further harm. I'm going to need to document these injuries and contact Child Protective Services." Panic flashed across the girl's face. "He'll know I told. He said no one would believe me anyway because he's an honor student and I'm nobody." "I believe you," Sarah assured her firmly, "and there will be evidence that can't be denied. Your brother will not have access to you once I make this report. Your safety is the priority now." As they spoke, Sarah texted Principal Bennett using their established code for urgent child welfare concerns. Within minutes, he arrived at the health office, where Sarah quickly explained the situation while Jasmine remained in the examination area. "I need to properly document these injuries," she told him quietly, "and then we need immediate intervention. This is clearly ongoing. Severe physical abuse." Principal Bennett nodded grimly. "I'll contact CPS directly and request emergency response." "Should we call the father?" "Not yet," Sarah advised. Jasmine's extreme fear of her father being notified suggests he may either be complicit or have dismissed previous attempts to disclose. Let's wait for the CPS investigator before making that call. Returning to Jasmine, Sarah explained the need to photograph her injuries as evidence. "Ms. Lopez from the counseling office can be present if that would make you more comfortable," she offered, knowing the female counselor had specialized training in trauma-informed approaches. Jasmine nodded mutely, the fight seeming to drain out of her now that her secret had been revealed. As they waited for the counselor to arrive, Sarah noticed the girl repeatedly glancing at the clock. "Are you worried about something specific right now?" Sarah asked gently. "Jason picks me up after school," Jasmine explained, her voice barely audible. "If I'm not there exactly on time, he gets mad. Says I'm embarrassing him by making him wait." This information created immediate logistical concerns for ensuring Jasmine's safety once the school day ended. Before Sarah could respond, Ms. Lopez arrived, and together they proceeded with the difficult but necessary process of documenting the extensive injuries. What Sarah hadn't anticipated was her own visceral reaction once the full extent of the abuse became visible. When Jasmine removed the hoodie completely, revealing not just the glimpsed injuries but an extensive network of burns, cuts, and bruises extending across her back, shoulders, and upper arms, the calculated cruelty required to inflict such harm on a child overwhelmed Sarah's professional detachment. "I need to step out for just a moment," she managed to say calmly, ensuring Ms. Lopez stayed with Jasmine. Once in the hallway, the full impact of what she'd witnessed hit her with physical force. She moved quickly toward Principal Bennett's office, her pace accelerating until she was nearly running, tears streaming down her face. "We need police involvement immediately," she told him, her voice shaking with both distress and urgency. "This is one of the worst cases of physical abuse I've ever seen. She needs emergency medical evaluation and protection. There's clear evidence of cigarette burns, belt marks, and what appear to be knife cuts on her back." Her uncharacteristic emotional display, running down the hallway in visible distress, underscored the severity of the situation more effectively than any clinical description could have. Principal Bennett immediately contacted both law enforcement and child protective services, emphasizing the need for emergency response based on the school nurse's assessment of imminent danger. The systems designed to protect vulnerable children engaged swiftly in Jasmine's case. A police officer arrived within 15 minutes, followed shortly by a CPS investigator with specialized training in adolescent abuse cases. After viewing the photographic evidence and speaking briefly with Jasmine, they initiated emergency protective custody, bypassing the usual notification to the father given the concerning circumstances. Jasmine was transported to the Children's Hospital for comprehensive medical evaluation, with Sarah accompanying her to provide continuity and support. The medical examination revealed even more extensive injuries than initially documented, including partially healed fractures in 2 fingers and significant malnutrition suggesting food might have been withheld as additional punishment. The investigation expanded rapidly from that point. Police officers went to the Rivera home, where they encountered 19-year-old Jason Rivera. A search of his room revealed disturbing evidence, including implements that matched Jasmine's injuries and a journal detailing his disciplinary sessions with his sister in language that suggested significant psychological disturbance. He was taken into custody on multiple felony charges related to child abuse. When Mr. Rivera was located at his workplace and informed of the situation, his reaction provided additional insights into the family dynamics. Rather than expressing shock or concern about Jasmine's welfare, his initial response was anger at the disruption to his work schedule and insistence that Jasmine was dramatic and always causing problems. This reaction, coupled with evidence that he had consistently failed to supervise his children despite knowing Jason had anger issues, led investigators to determine that the father had been negligent even if not directly abusive. For Sarah, the days following her discovery were emotionally exhausting yet affirming of her professional instincts. She had noticed what others had missed, persisted when met with resistance, and potentially saved Jasmine from escalating harm that could have become life-threatening. The physical education teacher's observations had provided crucial additional context, demonstrating the importance of staff collaboration in identifying potential abuse cases. "You did everything right," Dev assured her during a rare evening conversation about her work, careful to maintain appropriate confidentiality despite his position at the hospital. "You noticed the warning signs, you created a safe space for disclosure, and you responded immediately when you confirmed your concerns. Most importantly, you believed her when she'd been conditioned to think no one would." The case proceeded efficiently through both the child welfare and criminal justice systems. Jason Rivera, despite his previously clean record and academic achievements, faced substantial charges supported by overwhelming physical evidence and his own written documentation of the abuse. Psychological evaluation revealed concerning patterns suggesting he would likely have continued and potentially escalated the abuse without intervention. Mr. Rivera initially fought the removal of Jasmine from his custody, but his position weakened considerably when investigators discovered he had been regularly leaving both children unsupervised for extended periods while working multiple jobs, despite knowing of Jason's concerning behavior. The The court ordered him to complete parenting classes and demonstrate ability to provide appropriate supervision before any consideration of reunification would be possible. Most significantly for Jasmine's immediate well-being, the investigation located her mother in a neighboring state. Contrary to the narrative Jason had created, Mrs. Rivera had not abandoned the family by choice but had fled following domestic violence, then been prevented from contacting her children through a combination of legal maneuvers and intimidation by her ex-husband. When informed of Jasmine's situation, she immediately began the process of seeking custody, arriving within days to support her daughter's recovery. The reunion between mother and daughter was both heartbreaking and healing. The severed relationship, another layer of trauma Jasmine had endured. Yet it also represented the beginning of genuine recovery, as the girl was connected not only with her mother but with comprehensive support services including specialized trauma-focused therapy, medical care to address her injuries and malnutrition, and educational support to help her catch up academically after months of being unable to focus on school due to her home situation. The ripple effects of Jasmine's case extended far beyond her individual situation. The school district, recognizing the vital importance of Sarah's role in identifying the abuse, allocated funding for an additional nursing position, reducing the overwhelming caseload that had made it difficult to give adequate attention to concerning cases. A formal collaboration was established with Dr. Rhea's Adolescent Health Initiative, creating expedited pathways for assessment and treatment when school staff identified warning signs of potential abuse. Principal Bennett implemented mandatory training for all staff on recognizing signs of physical abuse, with particular attention to sibling abuse, an often overlooked form of maltreatment. The Physical Education Department, with Darlene Jackson taking the lead, developed new protocols for addressing dress code exceptions that balance discipline with welfare concerns, recognizing that behavioral issues sometimes mask deeper problems. 2 months after the intervention, Jasmine and her mother were established in a small apartment near the school, supported by both victim compensation funds and the domestic violence recovery organization that had helped Mrs. Rivera rebuild her life after fleeing the abusive marriage. Jasmine had returned to school with an individualized support plan that included regular check-ins with Sarah and accommodations for her ongoing recovery needs. Most remarkably, Jasmine herself was showing signs of healing that exceeded typical expectations for such a short time period. With appropriate trauma-focused therapy, she was developing language to express her experiences and coping strategies to manage her hypervigilance. At school, where sensitive handling of her situation had prevented rumors and stigmatization, she was gradually engaging in normal adolescent social activities, even joining an art therapy group where she discovered a talent for expressive painting. During a follow-up visit to the health office for routine medication, approximately 3 months after the intervention, Sarah observed a moment that crystallized the transformation taking place. Jasmine arrived wearing not the concealing hoodie that had been her armor, but a simple long-sleeve t-shirt, still covering her healing injuries, but representing a significant step toward normal adolescent self-presentation. "I have something for you," Jasmine said quietly, handing Sarah a small envelope. Inside was a card with a hand-drawn image of a hoodie transformed into a butterfly, spreading colorful wings. The message, written in careful script, read, "Thank you for seeing what I was hiding. You believed me when no one else did." This simple acknowledgement, recognizing both the trauma of concealment and the liberation of being believed, moved Sarah deeply. It represented the beginning of a healing journey that would continue long after the physical wounds had faded. By spring, approximately 6 months after Sarah had first noticed her refusing to change for gym class, Jasmine was thriving in ways that had seemed impossible during those early observations. Her academic performance had improved dramatically. She had developed genuine friendships with several classmates, and most significantly, she had begun to reclaim normal adolescent experiences that trauma had previously denied her. She asked to try out for the volleyball team next year, her mother shared during a school conference. 6 months ago, she wouldn't even consider being seen in short sleeves, let alone a sports uniform. Now she's talking about the future, making plans. It's like watching her childhood slowly return. The most profound transformation, however, was evident in Jasmine's increasing ability to trust adults after such profound betrayal by those meant to protect her. Where she had once been withdrawn and hypervigilant, She now engaged thoughtfully with teachers and counselors, gradually rebuilding her capacity for healthy relationships. "The counselor says I might always have scars," she told Sarah during one of their regular check-ins, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the healing marks on her arm. "But they'll fade a lot with time, and they don't have to define my whole life." This perspective, an adolescent integrating traumatic experience into a larger life narrative, rather than being consumed by it, reflected remarkable resilience fostered by appropriate support and intervention. The case had also transformed systems beyond Jasmine's immediate situation. Sarah's health office had become a model for trauma-informed school nursing, with educators from other districts visiting to learn about the protocols and approaches that had allowed her to identify and respond effectively to Jasmine's concealed abuse. The collaboration between the school and Dr. Rhea's initiative had expanded to include regular case consultations for students with complex health and social needs, creating more seamless support for vulnerable adolescents. Most significantly, the county had implemented new screening protocols specifically focused on identifying sibling abuse, recognizing that this form of maltreatment often went undetected because it fell outside traditional child protection frameworks focused primarily on parental behavior. This systemic change meant that other adolescents in situations similar to Jasmine's would be more likely to receive intervention before years of suffering accumulated. 1 year after Sarah had first noticed Jasmine refusing to remove her hoodie during gym class, she received a notification that still brings tears to her eyes when she recalls it. Jasmine had been selected to speak at a regional conference on adolescent resilience, sharing her journey from victim to survivor with professionals working in child welfare, education, and healthcare. The girl who had once hidden devastating injuries beneath a hoodie was now using her experience to help systems better recognize and respond to adolescents in crisis. In preparation for the presentation, Jasmine asked to meet with Sarah to ensure she accurately represented the nurse's perspective in her remarks. During their conversation in the now familiar health office, Sarah was struck by the poised, thoughtful young person sitting across from her, so different from the frightened, withdrawn girl she had first encountered. "How do you feel about sharing your story publicly?" Sarah asked, knowing that disclosure could be both empowering and challenging for trauma survivors. "Scared," Jasmine admitted candidly, "but also hopeful. Dr. Reyes says that sometimes the hardest stories are the ones people need to hear most. If talking about what happened to me helps even one person notice when a kid is hiding something important, then it's worth being nervous." This profound insight, recognizing that her painful experience could become a force for positive change, demonstrated emotional maturity beyond Jasmine's 15 years. It also reflected the remarkable journey from victim to advocate that appropriate support had made possible. "I still think about that day sometimes," Jasmine continued softly, "when you saw the burns and bruises and literally ran for help. My therapist says that reaction probably helped me believe it really was as bad as I thought, that I wasn't crazy or weak for not being able to handle it on my own." Sarah nodded, recalling her uncharacteristic emotional response with new perspective. Sometimes even professionals have human reactions to inhuman situations. "I'm just grateful the systems worked the way they should after that initial shock." As Jasmine prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "My mom and I are moving this summer," she said. "She got a really good job offer in the city. But I wanted you to know that I'll never forget what you did. How you noticed when no one else did." The following September, as Sarah welcomed students back for the new academic year, she carried with her a deeper commitment to trusting her professional instincts and looking beyond surface behaviors to their potential meanings. When a new student came to her office repeatedly with vague complaints of stomachaches, Sarah recognized the pattern of distress signals that might indicate problems beyond physical illness. Recovery hadn't been instant for Jasmine or her mother. The physical wounds had healed more quickly than the psychological ones, but with consistent support and appropriate interventions, both had found paths forward that seemed unimaginable during those dark days of hidden abuse. The systems, too, had changed: new awareness, better coordination, increased resources. Small but significant steps toward ensuring that other adolescents would not have to hide their suffering beneath hoodies or other concealments, that other families might receive intervention before years of trauma accumulated. The story that had begun with a nurse's concern about a dress code violation had transformed into something unexpected, Not just an intervention that saved one adolescent, but a catalyst for community-wide changes that would protect many others. As Sarah organized her supplies for the annual fall sports physicals, she kept the butterfly card from Jasmine on her bulletin board as a reminder of why looking beyond behavior to its causes was perhaps the most important skill any healthcare provider could develop. Not an ending, but a new beginning for Jasmine, for her healing mother, and for a school community more attuned to the silent signals that adolescents sometimes use when words are too frightening or forbidden. A reminder that healing is possible when caring professionals pay attention to the small details that speak volumes, and when systems respond not just with protection but with support for all those affected by family violence. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more. When a school counselor notices a 7-year-old boy wearing heavy sweaters during a heat wave, something doesn't add up. What he discovers turns his entire life upside down and ignites a race against time to save a young child's life. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe in protecting the innocent, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. At first, Marcus Williams thought the child was just self-conscious about his appearance, until he discovered the painful truth that changed everything. Marcus Williams had been a school counselor for 15 years, but his instincts about children in distress had never failed him. Walking through the hallways of Lincoln Elementary on this particularly warm September morning, he noticed 7-year-old Tyler Santos sitting alone on the bench outside the principal's office, sweat beading on his forehead despite the building's air conditioning. What struck Marcus wasn't just Tyler's isolation, but his clothing choice. While other children wore light t-shirts and shorts appropriate for the 82-degree weather, Tyler was bundled in a thick, gray hoodie that seemed far too large for his small frame. The sleeves hung well past his hands, and he constantly tugged at the fabric as if ensuring it stayed in place. Marcus had been working at Lincoln Elementary since completing his master's degree in school psychology. His office, decorated with calming blues and greens, featured comfortable seating areas designed to put anxious children at ease. Photos of his own family, his husband David and their 2 adopted children, sat prominently on his desk, visual reminders of the loving homes all children deserved. The school itself served a diverse community where economic struggles were common but not universal. Marcus had developed relationships with families across the spectrum, from affluent professionals to single parents working multiple jobs to make ends meet. His approach was always the same: observe, listen, build trust, and intervene when necessary. Tyler had been on Marcus's radar since the school year began 3 weeks ago. The boy was new to Lincoln Elementary, having transferred from another district. His academic performance was above average, but his social interactions were minimal. Teachers reported that he was polite but withdrawn, rarely speaking unless directly addressed. During lunch supervision the previous week, Marcus had observed Tyler sitting alone, methodically eating a sandwich while other children played nearby. When a classmate accidentally bumped into Tyler while running past, the boy had flinched so dramatically that he'd knocked over his water bottle, then immediately began apologizing profusely as if the collision had been his fault. Mrs. Patterson, Tyler's second-grade teacher, had mentioned during their weekly check-in that Tyler seemed overly cautious and had requested to use the restroom multiple times each day. She'd also noted that he never removed his sweater, even during indoor recess when the classroom grew warm. "Good morning, Tyler," Marcus said gently, approaching the bench. "Mind if I sit with you for a moment?" Tyler looked up with wide, dark eyes that seemed too serious for a 7-year-old. "I'm not in trouble," he said quickly. "Mrs. Patterson just told me to wait here while she talked to Mr. Rodriguez." "I know you're not in trouble," Marcus assured him, settling onto the bench with careful distance between them. "I was just wondering how you're settling in at your new school." "It's fine," Tyler replied, his standard response to most questions about his well-being. Marcus noticed how Tyler's hands remained hidden within the oversized sleeves, only his fingertips visible as he gripped the fabric. "That's a nice sweater. It looks very warm." A flash of something, fear, anxiety, crossed Tyler's features. "My dad says I get cold easily. He makes sure I dress warm." The explanation felt rehearsed, delivered with the same flat tone Marcus had heard from other children concealing difficult truths. "Does your dad pick out your clothes each morning?" Tyler nodded vigorously. "He lays them out the night before. Says I'm too young to make good choices about staying healthy." Before Marcus could respond further, Mrs. Patterson emerged from the principal's office with Mr. Rodriguez, the school principal. Tyler immediately straightened, pulling his sweater tighter around himself. "There you are, Tyler," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "Ready to head back to class." As Tyler stood and followed his teacher down the hallway, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. When the boy had risen from the bench, his sweater had shifted slightly, revealing what appeared to be a dark mark on his wrist. There and gone so quickly that Marcus questioned whether he'd actually seen it. The rest of the morning, Marcus found his attention repeatedly drawn to thoughts of Tyler Santos. During his lunch break, he pulled the boy's file, reviewing the limited information available. The family had moved from across town, with Tyler's father citing work-related reasons for the transfer. Medical records showed Tyler as healthy with no ongoing conditions that would explain constant sweater wearing. Emergency contact information listed only his father, Antonio Santos, with a note that Tyler's mother was deceased. That afternoon, Marcus positioned himself strategically in the hallway during dismissal time, observing as students collected their belongings and headed for buses or pickup areas. Tyler emerged from his classroom moving with the same careful precision Marcus had noticed before, his backpack clutched tightly against his chest. A man approached Tyler, tall, well-dressed in business attire, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. This had to be Antonio Santos. Marcus watched as the father placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder, causing the boy to tense slightly. "How was school today, Mijo?" Antonio asked, his voice carrying clearly across the hallway. "Good, Dad. I did everything you said." "That's my good boy. Let's get home." As they walked away, Marcus noticed Antonio's grip on Tyler's shoulder, firm enough that the boy's posture remained rigid until they disappeared through the exit doors. Something about the interaction felt off, though Marcus couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The next morning brought another sweltering day, with temperatures climbing toward the mid-80s by 10 a.m. Marcus made a point of observing Tyler during the morning transition between classes, noting that the boy's face was flushed with heat, but he made no move to remove or even unzip his heavy sweatshirt. During his planning period, Marcus sought out Mrs. Patterson in her classroom. "Do you have a few minutes to chat about Tyler Santos?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "Of course," she replied, looking up from the worksheets she was grading. "I've been meaning to talk to you about him, actually." "Oh? What's on your mind?" Mrs. Patterson set down her red pen and leaned back in her chair. "It's probably nothing, but there are little things that concern me. He's so compliant, almost unnaturally so. If I ask the class to line up, most kids will chat or dawdle, but Tyler is immediately in position, perfectly straight, hands at his sides." "That doesn't sound entirely problematic," Marcus noted, though he understood her concern. "By itself, no. But combined with other behaviors," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Yesterday, during art class, I noticed him favoring his left arm. When I asked if he was hurt, he immediately said he'd slept wrong and it was fine. But he winced every time he had to reach across his body." Marcus felt his concern deepening. "Has he ever removed his sweater? Even when it's obviously too warm?" "Never. And I've been teaching second grade for 12 years. I've never had a child so resistant to adjusting their clothing for comfort. When I suggested he might want to take it off during our outdoor nature walk last week, he actually looked panicked." "What did he say?" "That his dad would be upset if he came home without it. Said his dad checks to make sure he's dressed properly." The pattern was becoming clearer and more troubling. "Have you met Mr. Santos?" "Briefly during pickup one day. He seems intense. Very focused on Tyler's behavior and appearance. Made several comments about the importance of discipline and following rules." After their conversation, Marcus spent the remainder of his day observing Tyler more closely during hallway transitions and lunch periods. The boy's behavior was consistent. Hypervigilant, overly apologetic, and seemingly afraid to deviate from whatever strict guidelines governed his daily routine. During lunch, Marcus approached Tyler's table with his own meal. "Mind if I join you, Tyler? It's always nice to have company while eating." Tyler nodded, though his posture stiffened slightly. "Yes, sir. I mean, that's fine." As they ate in companionable silence, Marcus noticed Tyler's eating habits. The boy took small, measured bites, chewing thoroughly before swallowing, as if mealtime were a task requiring precision rather than enjoyment. "Your dad packs great lunches," Marcus commented, noting the elaborate bento-style arrangement of foods in Tyler's lunchbox. "He makes sure I eat healthy," Tyler replied. "He says growing boys need proper nutrition." "That's true. Does he cook dinner for you too?" Tyler nodded. "He makes all my meals. Says restaurants and school cafeteria food isn't good enough." The level of control suggested by Tyler's responses was striking. While parental involvement in children's nutrition was generally positive, the absolute nature of it, combined with Tyler's other behaviors, painted a concerning picture. "That's nice that he takes such good care of you," Marcus said carefully. "Do you ever get to choose what you want to eat?" A flash of confusion crossed Tyler's face, as if the concept of choice in meals was foreign. "Dad knows what's best for me. He studied nutrition." As the week progressed, Marcus continued documenting his observations while building rapport with Tyler. He learned that the boy was exceptionally bright, capable of complex reasoning and articulate communication when discussing neutral topics like schoolwork or books. But any questions that touched on personal preferences, family dynamics, or physical comfort resulted in those same rehearsed responses that deflected rather than revealed. On Friday afternoon, an incident occurred that shifted Marcus's concern into active alarm. During afternoon recess, Tyler had been playing alone on the swings when a soccer ball kicked by older students had struck him in the back. The impact itself was minimal, barely enough to move the swing, but Tyler's reaction was extreme. He'd fallen forward off the swing, landing on his hands and knees, then remained motionless for several seconds as if afraid to move. When Marcus, who'd been supervising nearby, approached to check on him, Tyler's eyes were wide with terror. "I'm sorry," Tyler had whispered repeatedly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get hit. Please don't tell my dad." "Tyler, you didn't do anything wrong," Marcus had assured him, helping the boy to his feet. "It was an accident. No one's in trouble." But Tyler continued apologizing, tears streaming down his face, his small hands shaking as he brushed dirt from his jeans. The reaction was so disproportionate to the minor incident that several other children had stopped playing to stare. Most troubling was what happened when Marcus placed a gentle hand on Tyler's back to comfort him. The boy had gasped audibly and jerked away, his face contorting in obvious pain. "Tyler, are you hurt?" Marcus had asked, crouching to the boy's eye level. "No, sir. I'm fine. Just startled." But the way Tyler had moved for the rest of recess, carefully, avoiding any motion that might stretch or twist his torso, suggested he was far from fine. That evening, Marcus found himself pacing his own living room, unable to shake the image of Tyler's terrified expression. His husband David, a pediatric nurse, listened as Marcus recounted the week's observations. "The pieces fit a pattern," David said grimly. "Excessive control over clothing and food, hypervigilance, disproportionate fear responses, reluctance to remove clothing that might reveal injuries. I keep hoping I'm reading too much into normal childhood quirks," Marcus admitted. "Your instincts are usually spot on. Remember the Martinez situation last year? You identified those warning signs weeks before anyone else." Marcus nodded, recalling the case that had resulted in removing a child from an abusive grandmother's care. His early intervention had potentially saved that child from escalating harm. "What's your next step?" David asked. "I need to see what Tyler's hiding under that sweater, but I have to be careful about how I approach it." Monday morning arrived with another heat wave, temperatures forecast to reach 90 degrees. Marcus arrived early, preparing his office and reviewing his strategy for the day. He'd decided to create a natural opportunity to observe Tyler more closely perhaps during a counseling session focused on adjustment to his new school. During first period, Marcus sent a note to Mrs. Patterson requesting that Tyler visit his office during the next transition period. When the boy arrived, his face was already flushed with heat, small beads of perspiration visible on his forehead despite the building's air conditioning. "Good morning, Tyler. Thank you for coming by," Marcus greeted warmly, gesturing to the comfortable chairs in his office. "I wanted to check in and see how you're settling in at Lincoln Elementary." Tyler perched on the edge of the chair, his posture rigid and formal. "Everything is fine, Mr. Williams. I like my teacher and I'm doing well in my classes." "I'm glad to hear that. You know, it's normal for students to have questions or concerns when they start at a new school. Is there anything you'd like to talk about?" "No, sir. Dad says I should be grateful for the opportunity to attend such a good school." Marcus noticed how Tyler's responses consistently referenced his father's opinions and instructions. "What do you think about the school? Not what your dad thinks, but your own feelings." The question seemed to genuinely perplex Tyler. He blinked several times, as if processing a complex mathematical equation. I like the library. There are a lot of books." "That's great. Do you enjoy reading?" For the first time, Tyler's expression brightened slightly. "Yes, sir. I read every night before bed." "What kinds of books do you like?" "Adventure stories and books about animals." Tyler's voice carried a hint of enthusiasm before quickly returning to its neutral tone. "Dad approves of educational reading. I bet you have some favorites. Would you like to tell me about a book you've enjoyed recently?" As Tyler began describing a novel about wolves, Marcus observed subtle changes in the boy's demeanor. His shoulders relaxed fractionally, and his hands emerged slightly from his oversized sleeves as he gestured while speaking. The transformation was remarkable, from a carefully controlled child to someone displaying normal 7-year-old excitement about a favorite story. "That sounds like a fascinating book," Marcus said, when Tyler finished his animated summary. "You know, it's getting quite warm in here. Would you be more comfortable if you took off your sweater?" The change was instantaneous. Tyler's face paled, his hands disappeared back into his sleeves, and he pulled the fabric tighter around himself. "No, thank you. I'm fine." "Are you sure? You look a little overheated." "Dad says I get sick if I don't stay warm enough. The air conditioning makes me cold." Marcus noted that Tyler's explanation directly contradicted his obvious discomfort from the heat. "That's interesting. Most people find air conditioning cooling, especially on hot days like today." Tyler's response was barely audible. "I'm different, I guess." The session continued for another 10 minutes, with Marcus carefully probing while Tyler maintained his protective barriers. When their time concluded, Marcus walked Tyler back to his classroom, noting how the boy moved with the same careful precision he'd observed before. During lunch duty, Marcus positioned himself near Tyler's usual table, observing the boy's interactions with classmates. A group of second graders had invited Tyler to join their game of cards, and for a moment he'd seemed genuinely interested. But when one child playfully tugged at Tyler's sleeve during an enthusiastic moment, Tyler had immediately withdrawn, apologizing and returning to his solitary lunch. The afternoon brought an unexpected opportunity. Mrs. Patterson approached Marcus during his planning period with a concerned expression. "I need your advice about Tyler," she said, closing his office door behind her. "Something happened during PE today." Marcus set down the file he'd been reviewing, giving her his full attention. "What occurred?" "Coach Henderson was having the kids do stretching exercises, and Tyler kept making excuses to avoid anything that required lifting his arms above his head. When Coach insisted, gently, mind you, Tyler complied but immediately started crying. Did he say he was hurt? That's the thing. He kept insisting he was fine, but he was obviously in pain. Coach asked if he needed to see the nurse, and Tyler became almost frantic, begging not to be sent to the clinic. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Where is Tyler now? Back in the classroom, working on math problems. But Marcus, when he was stretching, his sweater rode up slightly. I was helping another student nearby, and I caught a glimpse of his back. What did you see? Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped to a whisper. Dark marks, like bruises, multiple ones. The confirmation Marcus had been dreading was finally spoken aloud. Are you certain? As certain as I can be from a brief glimpse, but combined with everything else we've noticed. I need to see for myself, Marcus said, his professional training taking over. We need documentation before we can proceed. How do we do that without traumatizing him further? Marcus considered their options. I'm going to have him come to my office again, this time for what appears to be a routine health and wellness check. If I can create a scenario where removing his sweater seems medically necessary. An hour later, Tyler was once again sitting in Marcus's office, this time looking even more anxious than usual. Marcus had prepared carefully for this conversation, knowing it could be the most important interaction of Tyler's young life. Tyler, I asked you to come by because I'm a little concerned about your health, Marcus began gently. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that you seemed uncomfortable during PE today. Tyler's hands immediately gripped his sweater tighter. I'm fine. Just tired. I understand. But part of my job is making sure all our students are healthy and safe. Sometimes that means checking to make sure everything is okay physically. I don't need to see the nurse, Tyler said quickly, panic edging his voice. Please don't make me see the nurse. The desperate quality of Tyler's plea confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Tyler, why are you afraid of seeing the nurse? I'm not afraid. Dad says doctors and nurses aren't necessary unless something is really wrong. What would your dad consider really wrong? Tyler's breathing had quickened, and small beads of sweat were forming on his forehead despite the office's comfortable temperature. I don't know. He just says I shouldn't bother medical people with little things. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. Tyler, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Sometimes adults, even adults who are supposed to take care of us, do things that hurt children. If someone is hurting you, that's not your fault, and you're not in trouble for telling someone about it. The boy's eyes widened, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. The desire to trust warring against ingrained fear. Nobody's hurting me, Tyler whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. If someone was hurting you, would you tell me? Tyler's silence stretched for nearly a minute before he spoke again. What if? What if telling made things worse? The question broke Marcus's heart while simultaneously confirming his worst fears. Tyler, there are people whose job it is to make sure children are safe. If someone is hurting you, telling the right people makes things better, not worse. But what if the person hurting you is the person who's supposed to take care of you? The quiet question hung in the air like a confession. Marcus chose his next words carefully, knowing they could determine whether Tyler found the courage to disclose or retreated further into silence. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love and protect us make very bad choices. When that happens, other adults step in to make sure the child is safe. That's not the child's fault. It's actually the child being brave and smart. Tyler's lower lip began to tremble. I don't want to be brave. I just want the hurting to stop. The hurting can stop, Tyler. But first, I need to understand what's happening. Can you show me where you're hurt? For a long moment, Tyler stared at Marcus with those serious, too-old eyes. Then, with trembling hands, he slowly began to pull his sweater over his head. What Marcus saw made him struggle to maintain his professional composure. Tyler's thin torso was covered with bruises in various stages of healing. Some fresh and dark purple, others fading to yellow and green. The pattern was unmistakable. Belt marks across his back, what appeared to be grip marks on his arms, and a particularly dark bruise over his ribs that suggested a more serious impact. Oh, Tyler, Marcus breathed, his voice thick with emotion. Who did this to you? My dad, Tyler whispered, tears streaming down his face. He says I'm a bad kid who needs discipline. He says it's the only way to make me good. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger so intense it took all his professional training to channel it constructively. Tyler, what your father is doing is wrong. You are not a bad kid. You are a wonderful, smart, kind boy who deserves to be safe and loved. But I make mistakes. I spill things sometimes, or I'm too slow getting dressed, or I forget to say sir when I'm supposed to. All children make mistakes. That's how we learn and grow. Making mistakes never, ever means you deserve to be hurt. As Tyler's story poured out, tales of daily beatings for minor infractions, being locked in his room for hours, having food withheld as punishment, Marcus documented everything while providing gentle reassurance. The picture that emerged was of systematic, escalating abuse that had been occurring for months, possibly years. Tyler, I'm going to need to call some people who specialize in helping children who are being hurt. A police officer might come to talk to you, and someone from an agency called Child Protective Services. Terror flashed across Tyler's face. Will they tell my dad? Will I have to go home with him? No, Tyler. Once we report what's been happening, you won't have to go home with your father today. Other arrangements will be made to keep you safe. Where will I go? Marcus had been hoping Tyler might ask that question. There are special families who take care of children who need safe places to stay. Foster families. Some of them are temporary, while others can become permanent if that's what's best for the child. The next few hours unfolded rapidly. Marcus contacted Child Protective Services and the police, both of whom responded immediately given the severity and documentation of Tyler's injuries. School nurse Janet Morrison photographed Tyler's bruises with the specialized equipment maintained for such situations, her gentle manner helping to calm the frightened boy. Detective Sarah Kim, who specialized in child abuse cases, interviewed Tyler with Marcus present for emotional support. Tyler's account was detailed and consistent, describing a pattern of abuse that had intensified since his mother's death 2 years earlier. Your bravery in telling the truth is going to help other people make sure you're safe from now on, Detective Kim assured Tyler. And it might help other children too, if your father has hurt anyone else. Child Protective Services caseworker Maria Santos, no relation to Tyler's father, she assured the boy, explained the immediate plan. Tyler would be placed in emergency foster care while the investigation proceeded and longer-term arrangements were determined. I know this is scary and confusing, Maria told Tyler as they sat in Marcus's office. But there's a family I'd like you to meet. They've taken care of children in situations like yours before, and they're very good at helping kids feel safe again. By late afternoon, Tyler found himself in the home of Jim and Carol Peterson, a couple in their 50s who had been emergency foster parents for over a decade. Their warm, organized home featured a guest room clearly designed with children in mind, colorful but not overwhelming, with books, games, and stuffed animals available without being imposing. We're so glad to meet you, Tyler, Carol said warmly as she showed him around the house. We know today has been really difficult, but you're safe here. Tyler, still wearing his sweater despite the day's heat, looked around the unfamiliar environment with cautious hope. Do I have rules I need to follow? Just basic household rules, Jim replied with a gentle smile. Be kind to others, clean up after yourself, and let us know if you need anything. Nothing complicated. What if I make a mistake? The question clearly broke both foster parents' hearts, but Carol answered with steady warmth. Everyone makes mistakes, Tyler. When that happens, we talk about it and figure out how to do better next time. No one gets hurt in this house for making mistakes. Over the following days, Tyler began the slow process of learning to live without constant fear. The Petersons, experienced in helping traumatized children, created structure without rigidity, offering choices Tyler had never been allowed to make. What to wear, what to eat for snacks, which books to read before bed. Marcus visited daily, both to check on Tyler's adjustment and to continue the counseling process. He watched with professional satisfaction and personal joy as the boy gradually began to relax, to speak without measuring every word, to play without constantly looking over his shoulder. 3 days after Tyler's placement, Detective Kim brought news that would change everything permanently. Antonio Santos had been arrested at his workplace, charged with multiple counts of child abuse. During the investigation of his home, police had discovered evidence suggesting Tyler's mother hadn't died in an accident as claimed, but had been killed during a domestic violence incident that Antonio had successfully covered up. What does that mean for Tyler? Marcus asked during a private conference with the detective and Maria Santos. "It means he'll never have to see his father again," Maria replied. "Antonio will be facing both child abuse charges and likely murder charges. Tyler is free to start a new life." When they shared this news with Tyler, his reaction was complex. Relief mixed with grief for the father who had hurt him but whom he had still loved. Confusion about his mother's true fate. But underlying it all, a growing sense of safety. "So I get to stay with Mr. and Mrs. Peterson?" Tyler asked. "For now, yes," Maria confirmed. "And they've asked if you might be interested in staying with them permanently. What do you think about that?" Tyler considered the question with the same seriousness he brought to everything. "They're nice, and they have lots of books. And Mr. Peterson makes really good pancakes." Such simple criteria for choosing a family, but they represented everything Tyler had been missing: kindness, intellectual stimulation, and basic nurturing care. 2 weeks later, Marcus was completing paperwork in his office when Tyler appeared in his doorway, no longer wearing the oversized sweater that had hidden his suffering. Instead, he wore a t-shirt depicting wolves, a gift from the Petersons that honored his love of the books he'd described during their first real conversation. "Mr. Williams? I wanted to show you something." Tyler approached Marcus's desk and carefully placed a drawing he'd made. A house with stick figures representing a family, the sun shining brightly overhead, and words written in careful second-grade handwriting. "Thank you for helping me be safe." "This is beautiful, Tyler," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You should be very proud of how brave you've been. Mrs. Peterson says brave kids who tell the truth help other kids be brave too," Tyler said, echoing the words that had been used to encourage his disclosure. "Maybe other kids wearing sweaters when it's hot will get help too." Marcus smiled, struck by Tyler's innate understanding of how his courage could ripple outward to help others. "I think you're absolutely right about that." As Tyler skipped back to his classroom, actually skipped, something Marcus had never seen him do before, the counselor reflected on the transformation. In the space of mere weeks, a terrified, controlled child had become a boy who could express preferences, make choices, and begin to heal from trauma that would have broken many adults. The Petersons had already begun preliminary paperwork to adopt Tyler, a process that would make their temporary family arrangement permanent. Tyler had enthusiastically agreed, particularly when he learned that adoption meant forever family, and that no one could ever take him away from people who truly cared for his well-being. That evening, Marcus drove home to his own family with a deep sense of satisfaction and renewed purpose. These cases, the ones where intervention came in time, where children found safety and love, reminded him why he'd chosen this profession and why every day of careful observation and gentle probing was worthwhile. Stories like these remind us that sometimes, one observant person can be the difference between a child's suffering and salvation. Every day, heroes like Marcus are making these life-changing interventions. But how many signs do we miss? Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more powerful stories of rescue and redemption.